Good morning and welcome to another edition of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, I'm making a return to the series of videos that I was doing on Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition. This is by request of one of my subscribers, and recently he or she put up a post asking that I continue going through AD&D Second Edition, and so I'm certainly glad to do so. As you can see here today, I'm going to be focusing on the Dungeon Master's Guide, Chapter 14, on time and movement. And, the whole issue of time is a really interesting one because, if you're aware, there is a big debate going on within the OSR and including, those members of what they declare as being the Bro SR, which really center their gaming philosophy on rules as written, and they're really big on one-to-one time, one-to-one time parity between in-game time and real-world time. And while I don't agree with or accept their premise that that is in fact rules as written and it's the only way to really play the game, especially AD&D First Edition, because it's one of those rules that Gary Gygax himself didn't adhere to very strongly himself, and never really put it out there that it is an essential element of gameplay, or even proper gameplay, even more so. But when I came across this chapter, and I was like, you know what, they kind of address partially what I have always believed to be, and so I want to focus on that. And then I'm going to gloss over the movement aspect of it, because it's fairly well known what movement rates are over wilderness and all that kind of thing. But I will go through it as well. The other thing I wanted to say is that there's also been another debate, and many of you might be aware of what I have as a definition for old school role playing or old school Renaissance or old school revival, and I always use the milestone age of a game as being 30 years and older, as being the benchmark for where I would start considering a game system to be old school. And so AD&D Second Edition is absolutely OSR. It is absolutely old school. It does have retro clones of it made, right? For Golden Glory is a direct retro clone of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition. Many of the elements that were found in Second Edition can also be found in third and 3.5 and 3.75 and 4 and 5, so it did create certain aspects that would be carried throughout the remainder of TSR's time in publishing Dungeons and Dragons, and would extend into the Wizards of the Coast era as well. So it's definitely old school. It's nearly 35 years old, so it's almost 5 years beyond my consideration of a 30-year mark. So for those who think that, myself or others don't consider Second Edition to be old school, I am clearly stating right now that AD&D Second Edition is old school. So without further ado, let me jump right into Chapter 14, Time and Movement of the Dungeon Master's Guide, AD&D 2nd Edition. So here we have it, and I am going to, I will enlarge this if necessary. Actually, I will. If I lose my mark, just bear with me. So the passage of time in an AD&D campaign can have relatively minor or extremely significant effects on the play of the game. The importance of time is decided almost entirely by the DM. Some DMs are very little, care very little about strict timekeeping. Others track every moment of action using a rigid calendar. Either method is acceptable, and each has its advantages and disadvantages. The two can even be combined as appropriate to the situation. All right, so this kind of eliminates the argument that one-to-one timing is raw. Rules as written, and that it is the only proper way. So this eliminates that right off the bat. Regardless of how time is handled, some timekeeping is unavoidable. Combats must be fought in rounds. Spells have specific durations which become important as characters explore caverns and ancient ruins. Days are used to measure overland travel. Characters must sleep sometime. However, most passing time occurs within a single adventure. Spells rarely carry over from adventure to adventure unless the session is stopped with the characters lost in winding caverns or the like. Rounds of combat, while taking several game minutes, don't affect or spill over into subsequent adventures. Days of travel often have no effect other than healing and the consumption of supplies. So again, real time and game time are being flexed to enhance the flow of the game itself. If the DM wants, this is only sort of timekeeping required. Time passed in previous adventures has little or no effect on the current session. Each session or adventure is distinct and separate. For example, in one adventure, the characters spend a few hours in a dungeon, get injured, have some success, and return wounded. The night's game session ends with them returning to their home base. At the next game session, the DM announces a week or so has passed since you last went out. Everybody is healed and rested. People with spells can pick up new ones. The DM has chosen not to worry about the passage of time in this instance. An entire campaign can be played this way. I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm sorry about that delay. So an entire campaign can be played this way. Here's another example. In one adventure, a group of characters travels for 3 weeks and has several encounters, ending camped outside some ruins. The next session starts after the characters have camped for 5 days, so they can heal their wounds. Several hours pass as they explore the ruins, but no one is particularly hurt when they return to camp and the game session ends. The next session starts the morning after their previous adventure. Everyone having gotten a good rest, the characters set out again. They spend a week on the road and arrive at the village. Here, the mage insists everyone wait while he researches a vital spell. Again, the game session ends. The next session begins 2 months later, after the mage has learned his spell and continues from there. Throughout all of this, the DM is more or less winging it, estimating the time required and the time spent. There is nothing wrong with this method, nor is it particularly unrealistic. Medieval travelers often stopped at friendly or safe havens for long periods while on their way to a final destination. There was little pressure to hurry. Using this simple time tracking approach frees the DM from many of the concerns of timekeeping and prevents some obstacles to the adventure from occurring. We can't go on an adventure. We'll all get hacked up and we have to heal. Most of all, it is easy. Detailed timekeeping. As noted, however, there are disadvantages to some simple time tracking. Problems become more pronounced as the characters advance in level. Your campaign world becomes larger and more players take part in the game. At low levels, characters tend to go on short adventures. A few hours in a dungeon followed by a speedy return is all they can survive. Therefore, it is easy to have a week's interval within adventures, since the time passed does not impact on the character's activities. As characters reach higher levels, however, their ambitions grow and adventures become longer. More precise time tracking proves useful. More precise methods can become unworkable, however, when player characters split into small groups undertaking separate simultaneous adventures. If one group sets out on a long journey while the rest of the party stays in the city, their game sessions are going to be of very different time scales. In their first session, the city dwellers may go on a short dungeon expedition. Several hours of game time, the amount of imaginary time spent on an adventure pass. The DM then has a session with the travelers, and they spend 3 weeks of the game time in the wilderness during their game. There is now a game time difference between the two groups of 3 weeks minus 1 day. If the travelers return to the city at the end of their adventure, the group in town must suddenly be moved forward in time to catch up with them if both groups wish to adventure together. Fortunately, this is not a great problem. The DM can simply say, 3 weeks have passed and you are all reunited again. That is key. You can't alter real world time. It is what it is. You can, as the dungeon master, bend the in-game time to match up when your players are coming to your table looking to play. I have never understood that whole idea that comes out of the one-to-one timekeeping dogma that you're going to tell a player who arrives at your table, well, you can't play that character in this session because that character was on a 10-day trip. No, what you do is you tell them, all right, we're going to assume your character has returned over the last 3 or 4 days. The rest of the party have been doing a variety of things within the confines of the city that they were sitting in, and now you are all rejoined together and you can continue. These things can be twisted and bent to match the constraints of real world time and being able to get together for a game session and the fictitious timekeeping that is taking place in the game world. The city adventurers can spend those 3 weeks doing background work, training, researching spells, making minor magic items, building a house. This is good use of free time. However, If one of the city's characters decides to join the travelers, perhaps using a teleport spell to catch up with them suddenly, the 3 week differential becomes a problem. Was the character actually with the traveling group for 3 weeks without doing anything? Must he wait for 3 weeks before he can join them? What if the other characters in the town want to adventure more during that time? At this point, keeping track of time or having the players do it becomes pretty important. Um, in my opinion, um, if you don't split up the party, and I mean it's the same thing like during an adventure, the what do you want to call it? The trope, let's say, is don't split up the party. Well, the same thing applies for in between adventures and such is, and if you have such a large group of players, don't put them in the same campaign setting. Don't put them in the predicament where they could be switching and back and forth between different game sessions during the week, or having different characters to use and everything. When I run my campaigns, I have a single set of players who play with a single set of characters, all right, in an adventure session that is unique to them. If they want to play, that's my Tuesday night game. If they want to play on Fridays as well, they're playing with different characters, different setting, possibly even a different game system. All right. And that's how I avoid this whole issue of, multiple player characters or players looking to play on different days of the week and yet still participate in the campaign world with connections to what the other players are doing and the other characters are doing at the same time. What a mind-boggling mess of timekeeping that is, unless you hand wave those problems away. You come up with strange and magical circumstances of how all of this kind of happens to get everybody that's sitting at your table at the time to play the characters that they want in the session that they want to play them in. All right. So preparing the calendar. Sorry. One advantage of careful timekeeping is the detail and the flavor it adds to the DM's campaign. If a calendar is kept, the DM has a way of recording the passing seasons, holidays, months, cycles of the moon, or other details that give a world life. And I agree with that. You should be actively using the calendar of the world. Clerics have holy days to observe. Werewolves become more prevalent near full moons. Snows come and birds fly south, and so on and so forth, right? And then they go into the details of holy days and such. So I'm going to skip over that because I think that pretty much most of you understand the importance of that for clerics and potentially paladins as well. Preparing a calendar does not take time. The easiest method is to buy a small pocket calendar for the current year, start the campaign the same date as the first adventure. Thus, if the first game is played on April 3rd, the campaign starts that day. The real calendar and game calendar will get out of sync quickly, but at least there is some record of seasons, moons, and important dates. This is a good starting point, but a modern calendar is not the same as that used in medieval times, and certainly not the same as those used in fantasy worlds, right? Many fantasy settings use a 13-month calendar, right? And 28 or 29 days per month or something like that. The basics have to be determined aside from recording the length of years, months, and weeks, which can be anything the DM decides. The calendar should also name them. Um, you can use real names or, whatever you want. So, pretty much what I would recommend doing here is to use the real world calendar and then do as they're saying, just change the names of the months and everything like that, have it start on the date, have the calendar still a 365 day calendar year with 12 months and such. Makes it a lot easier for you to deal with it that way. And then you just plop in the holidays sort of where they would be. You can get the phases of the moon that way very easily as well. So you're going to homebrew your calendar, even if it's a fantasy world setting, let's say the Greyhawk calendar. You're just going to convert the Greyhawk calendar names and significant dates, and then twist it a little bit to match up with a 12-month calendar year. Physical cycles can be worked out. Religious observances can also be dropped in, and so on and so forth. So it's not a huge effort. You don't have to reinvent the calendar, per se. You can utilize what you have at your disposal and go with it. Or you could take, let's say, the Greyhawk calendar and then just keep it in its essence and write the real dates from our real world calendar next to it on the Greyhawk calendar that you've printed out. And you could do it that way as well. Time as a game balancer. Finally, remember that time can be used quite effectively to balance a campaign. With it, a DM can prevent an adventuring party from achieving too wide a spread of character levels. If one character is advancing faster than others, that person's progress can be slowed a little by carefully enforcing the rules for research, training, and healing. If several people are outpacing the rest of the group, they can be required to go on longer adventures, ones that take more game time but not playing time to complete. At the same time, characters who are lagging in level can have time restrictions relaxed a little. The day-to-day drudgeries go a little quicker for these characters, and their adventures require shorter amounts of time to game time. This will allow them to undertake several adventures to the other group's one or two, giving the lower level characters a chance to catch up. Although on the surface such things look unfair, most players will realize the DM is doing this for the best of all players involved. Another thing that I would recommend doing is that if you have a lower level character that joins the party and the party is running, let's say the party is predominantly third level and this new character is first level, and this new character is by means of luck and just being overwatched by the others, completing a third level adventure. Give them more experience points for surviving it, right? Give them a 10% or a 15 or possibly even a 20% bonus to their experience points, because, and you can justify it because they are watching more experienced player characters doing their functions. They're facing a higher level of challenge. They're learning far quicker than they would have if they were in a first level party where everyone's kind of learning the ropes as they go. So I think that that's a better way of doing it, is to give them a bonus, percentage of, of experience points gained, because they're facing that higher challenge, and still surviving. Even if the others are really carrying them, they're still learning far more. And so that's another way that you don't have to bend time. You're just increasing their experience gain, for doing the same actions in the same game time and so forth. So that's pretty much it on the that is pretty much it on the time um, portion of chapter 14. Now I'm going to go just very, very briefly through the movement because the whole chapter is entitled Time and Movement. And the time was only about 2 pages long, as you can see, so there's not a whole lot of rules attached to it. It's more of hints and tips of how you can balance real world and game world time. So the movement, and I will now switch back. Um, Movement, we just get to, and I'm going to breeze through this fairly quickly. Um, so you have mounted overland movement, advantages of that, increased overland speed. All right, so mounts can be pushed to double its normal daily movement rate, but only at the risk of lameness and exhaustion. So there are a number of rules that are going to be brought into this. When you're dealing with mounts, you have to take care of them, obviously. There are various types of animals that are going to come with significant differences between them, and they'll have different upkeep, they'll have different realms of usage, different types of terrain that they're either effective in, ineffective in, or completely barred from. All right, so we have horses, ponies, and donkeys and mules. We have camels. We have dogs as mounts. We have elephants. We have yaks. There are vehicle rules here, which again create differences in overland speeds and upkeep and maintenance and so forth. Different types of terrain that they can be utilized again. And all of this is going to alter game time, all right, as the players are having their characters utilize travel over time and mounts and such. So you have carts and wagons and chariots, terrain and vehicles and the effects of terrain. So a terrain effects on movement, which is an optional rule. We go on, and here are the effects on movement. So even darkness, darkness reduces the faster movement is possible. So only 1/3 of a faster movement is possible. Heavy brush or forest is 2/3. Ice or slippery footing is only 1/3, and so on. So terrain costs for overland movement. So how much does it cost? So the movement cost and how that is going to reduce the amount by the number of movement points or value. Roads and trails, more terrain modifiers and hindrances, time and movement. So we have movement on water, and so you're going to have significant lengthy times of movement by water. Oftentimes it'll be days, if not even weeks, of travel by water. And then there's aerial movement, which is by far the fastest of movement, other than teleportation, obviously, or gating here and there. Getting lost, so there's a significant change here, or just a note here to make when characters are lost. Sometimes characters are lost because they do not know how to get to a specific place. They know where they have been and how to get back there, but they don't know the correct route to reach their goal. This occurs most often when following a road, a trail, or a map in a river or set of directions. Under these circumstances, there is a reasonable certainty that player characters will wind up somewhere. After all, roads go from place to place and rivers start and end somewhere. Whether this is where the player characters wants to go is another matter entirely. No particular rules are needed to handle these situations, only some confusing forks in the road and the wit or lack thereof of the players. When characters get lost, that is going to add the amount of game time taking place. And you are going to alter it to still fit within the confines of your session time, which is real world time. You're not going to end a session 15 minutes into your session time because the characters got lost, and you determine that the characters get lost for 2 or 3 days. And you're not going to stop the session at that point and say, well, you're lost for 2 or 3 days. We're going to pick this up in 2 or 3 days from now, where you can pick up where you once again found your way back on the proper trail you were seeking, right? You're going to hand wave the being lost. You're going to account for it in the game time, of the game world time, but not in the session time, obviously. Hopelessly lost is another matter altogether. This happens when player characters have no idea where they are, how exactly to get back from where they were, and so on. And this is, of course, going to extend even more so the time that they are trying to discover first where they're at and then how to get back on track. That often happens when players awake and they find themselves in a place they have no idea where they're at. That's more frequently the hopelessly lost. Dealing with lost characters. Once a group is lost, no further checks need be made. They're lost until they get themselves back into familiar territory. Don't tell players when their characters are lost. Let them continue to think they are headed in the right direction. Gradually veer them away from their true direction. Player characters should realize for themselves that they are no longer heading in the right direction. This generally comes when they don't get to whatever point they hope to reach. All right. Allow players to continue on the direction that they're going in, even if it's the wrong direction, and wait until they suddenly realize, hey, you know what? We're not where we're supposed to be. Somehow we made the wrong turn or whatever. Maybe their map is faulty, and now they are lost. And let them role play that out. Again, you're not going to shut down the session and pick up, 2 days later because they've lost track of time. They lost track of where they were going, I should say. So, again, there's these little tidbits in here that are important to remember. And the main thing that you're going to do, I'm going to go back to the beginning of movement here, so that we are leaving off in the right spot. And here, we'll leave it there, because this is about when they get into the nuts and bolts of movement. So, as you can see, there's a definite layout of rules or suggestions, I should say, that are recommended to use for tying game time with real world time, tying a real the game calendar with the real world calendar, and what to do when characters are traveling over land what to do when characters become lost and such. So there is very good guidance for how to handle those things. And in most of the cases, what they're suggesting is that if you're going to modify anything, you modify game time to match the real world session time when the next session is supposed to begin. And counter to what they're saying or suggesting, like if you have these large groups that are doing different adventures and such like that, I personally would not put them in the same game world and the same setting or the same time frame or whatever. I would have them functioning as separate groups of players and player characters and everything, and I would not allow them to intermix, because then you do run into that problem of having to say, well, that character is not available for the next 3 weeks. But wait, I came here for this session. I want to play that character. You avoid that. So I would always side on maintaining your session time. And when your players arrive at your table, they're looking to play a session. And you can twist and manipulate game time to match up with that, so that they're playing the characters that they want on the adventures that they want, and with the group of players that are there on hand. And like I said, I normally would not mix groups together and mix and match them and such, unless they're playing totally different characters. And they want to do that. Otherwise, and with the thing with the experience point gap that's going to create when you're not playing one character, you're playing another, and then you bring that character back and you want to, and you'll get this big spread. You'll have a third level party, with a first level character, and how does that first level character pick up? I wouldn't adjust their game time. I would adjust their experience gain during that time. And I think that's a much easier way to fix that issue. And it makes sense as well. You can justify it logically by saying a lower level character is going to gain more knowledge and experience from observing higher level characters doing their thing, even if it's not directly class to class combination. There's enough common actions that are taking place that you can justify that greater gain of experience. And I would say I would attach a 10% bonus for every full level of average separation, right? So if a first level character is traveling with a third level party, then that first level character is going to get a 20% increase in experience gained while performing that adventure. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it continues the idea that AD&D Second Edition is really a very good edition. There's a lot of improvements that came into AD&D Second Edition above what AD&D First Edition did. It is certainly old school, so I'm saying it again. This is an old school edition of Dungeons and Dragons. It is over 34 years old, almost 35 years old at this point. And so it meets my definition of what is old school, being 30 years or older. And it's an edition that a lot of people came into the game with, right? So these are people that are in their 40s or late 40s. They started playing this in their late 10s or early teens and such. And so this is the game of choice for them. And I certainly welcome their input into the discussion of what is old school. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks for joining. I hope you liked this video. If you hadn't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I know when I look at my analytics, I see roughly between like 50 and 60% of the people that are coming through here and watching these videos are actually not subscribed. So please consider subscribing. And as always, leave your comments. Comments are great. Comments are great for the algorithm. It is from comments that I get suggestions on what to do, what to cover next time. And this video is a direct response to a comment on a video I made over a year ago. I do try to respond to the commenters on my channel, to my subscribers and their requests as quickly as I can. And so I was really excited to get back into this again. And I promise you it won't be another year or more before I get back to AD&D second edition. So if you haven't seen my coverage on AD&D second edition, this is going to be in the playlist along with several other videos, probably about close to 10 other videos on AD&D second edition. So I encourage you to go back and take a look at those as well. And feel free to respond to those, and I will address your questions about those previous videos as well. So have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your upcoming weekend. And as always, I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon, and at a gaming table, at a convention, hopefully even sooner. I know in about 7 days, actually 7 days from today, I will be running a game at ShireCon in Connecticut. That is September 15th. And I'm actually going to start really putting together all of my materials for it and doing a little test run of the adventure and such, and see how that's going to play out. Yep, my first convention is next weekend, so I'm really excited about that. And for the rest of you, enjoy, take care, have a great day.